Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, what if I told you that one of the absolute biggest, most influential tech companies on the planet started with just two guys, a tiny computer with literally no screen or keyboard, and one incredibly simple idea? Back in 1975, Microsoft wasn't sitting on billions of dollars. They didn't have these sprawling, massive campuses, thousands of employees, or a global cloud network. It was literally just two young programmers in Albuquerque, New Mexico, typing out code on a teletype machine. But today, they're an absolute behemoth. We're talking dominance in everything from workplace software and gaming to global cloud infrastructure and now artificial intelligence.
So that brings us to a really fascinating question. How on earth did a tiny software startup become a global technology giant? And more importantly, how did Microsoft survive and thrive while so many other massive tech giants from that era just disappeared? We aren't just going to rattle off a dry history of products today. Oh no, we are looking at an absolute masterclass in crisis and adaptation. It's all about how they stared down existential threats and managed to completely reinvent themselves time and time again. Section 1. The Early Software Foundation.
Okay, let's dive right into this. To really understand their incredible survival story, we have to look at the super scrappy beginnings of founders Bill Gates and Paul Allen. Picture this. It's 1975, and computers are mostly these giant machines locked away in labs for large organizations. But then the Altair 8800 personal computer drops, and Gates and Allen realize something absolutely brilliant. They realize the hardware is basically just an expensive paperweight without software to actually run it. So they whipped up a version of the basic programming language for it. Fast forward just a bit to 1980, IBM is building a PC and they desperately need an operating system. Microsoft steps up, provides what becomes PC-DOS, and eventually MS-DOS, licensing it out to manufacturers. Then, 1985 hits, and boom, the first version of Windows arrives, finally bringing a much-needed graphical interface to the masses. The foundational genius here. They realized way before anyone else that controlling the software, not sweating over manufacturing the hardware, was the undeniable future of computing. They built this highly scalable ecosystem without having to build a single physical computer.
Section 2. Building the Windows ecosystem.
Here is where Microsoft transforms from just selling a basic operating system into an absolute unavoidable necessity for businesses, schools, and pretty much everyday consumers. They figured out that people didn't just want an OS, right? They needed actual productivity software to get things done. So you get step 1, Word for typing up your documents, step 2, Excel for crunching your financial data, step 3, PowerPoint for building presentations, and step 4, every single one of these powerful tools was beautifully designed to run seamlessly on Windows. This right here perfectly highlights the compounding value of the Microsoft Office suite. These weren't just random, separate apps. They brilliantly reinforced one another. By bundling them together, Microsoft basically created this inescapable ecosystem where every product made the other products infinitely more valuable. So the crucial point we really need to understand here boils down to one incredibly powerful concept: habit. By making their software an everyday fixture at work, Microsoft wasn't just selling lines of code anymore. They were literally selling a universal workflow. Think about it. Once a business spent all the time and money training its entire staff to use Word and Excel, switching to some totally different system became wildly expensive and just a massive headache. They had successfully built habit, and that habit locked down the enterprise market, securing the funds for all their future ambitions.
Section 3. Facing the Internet Threat.
Now, being the undisputed market leader brings a whole new set of massive risks. In the late 90s and into the 2000s, Microsoft aggressively tied their web browser, Internet Explorer, right into Windows. And well, that triggered a massive, highly distracting antitrust case in 1998 over anti-competitive practices. And while they were bogged down fighting in court, the entire world shifted beneath their feet. The internet absolutely exploded, and it put their traditional business model at serious existential risk. As you can see here, on one side you have Microsoft's highly successful but heavily legacy-focused traditional model, desktop computers and Windows software. But on the right, the dawn of a terrifying new era. You've got Google completely dominating search, Amazon totally transforming online commerce and cloud computing, and Apple reinventing consumer devices and mobile. These new competitors were agile, they lived on the web, and they were moving incredibly fast. Suddenly, Microsoft, the absolute king of the 90s, was looking like a dinosaur, entirely out of step with where the world was going. The stakes literally could not have been higher. This was about corporate survival. Microsoft realized they desperately needed to expand their footprint to survive. And that brings us to 2001, the year Microsoft dropped the very first Xbox. This is such a prime example of the company realizing, hey, we have to break out of the office cubicle and literally fight for space in the living room if we want to stay relevant. Entering the gaming industry against entrenched giants like Sony and Nintendo, that was a massive, massive gamble. But it proved that Microsoft was entirely willing to step way outside its traditional comfort zone just to adapt.
Section 4. Pivoting to the cloud. But honestly, the real salvation wasn't going to come from a gaming console. Enter Satya Nadella. When he took over as CEO in 2014, he understood something absolutely crucial. The future of the company lived on the internet, not on local hard drives. He fundamentally rethought what kind of company Microsoft even was. And this table brilliantly illustrates that shift. Under the old Microsoft, revenue was heavily driven by one-time software licenses. You bought the CD in a box once and used for years. But the new Microsoft? They aggressively shifted to predictable, recurring subscriptions, which is what we now know as Microsoft 365. And even bigger, instead of fiercely building a moat around Windows as the center of their universe, they shifted their focus to cloud infrastructure with Azure and actually started embracing open partnerships. Nadella totally flipped the company culture. Instead of trying to force customers to only use Windows, they made sure Microsoft services were available absolutely everywhere. Azure might not have been an instant overnight leader, but they leveraged those millions of deep enterprise relationships to turn it into an absolute cloud powerhouse. Section 5. The era of AI. Now, what is so wildly fascinating to me is how Microsoft is successfully applying this exact same survival blueprint right now amidst the next massive technological revolution. Just like they adapted to the graphical interface, the internet, and the cloud, they are pivoting so hard into artificial intelligence. I mean, they invested billions of dollars into OpenAI right out of the gate. They strategically positioned Azure to provide the heavy lifting infrastructure required for intense AI workloads. They're rapidly weaving AI productivity features right into Microsoft 365. And they've rolled out Copilot, an AI assistant woven entirely across their software. So what's the major takeaway here? Microsoft isn't just trying to sell you some trendy, isolated AI gadget. No way. They are aggressively embedding AI directly into the enormous ecosystem they already own. Imagine just opening up an Excel spreadsheet and casually asking an AI to analyze the data, or having it help you write code. They are making AI an unavoidable daily habit in the workplace, exactly like they did with Office decades ago. Section 6. The blueprint for survival. Look, if there is absolutely one thing you take away from this entire explainer, let it be this: adaptation over perfect prediction. Microsoft rarely just abandoned its past. Instead, they continually stacked new innovations right on top of their existing business relationships. Windows built the user base, Office locked in the productivity habit, enterprise software captured the corporate world, Azure moved all those vast relationships into the cloud. And now, AI is being baked into every single layer of that. Did they see every threat coming? Absolutely not. They basically missed the entire mobile phone revolution, they were late to the internet party, they faced brutal legal battles and public scrutiny. But here's the secret. A successful company isn't necessarily the one that has a crystal ball and perfectly predicts the future. It's the company that can adapt quickly and decisively when the future turns out completely differently than they expected. I really want to leave you with this powerful thought from our source material. Build something valuable, but never assume the world will stay the same. When you think about it, Microsoft's greatest product wasn't Windows or Office or even Azure. Their absolute greatest product has always been their ability to continually reinvent their own business. Because consumer behaviors shift, competitors evolve, and those who stubbornly refuse to change, they eventually just fall behind. Which leaves us with one massive, lingering question to think about. As AI completely rewrites the fundamental rules of computing once again, what massive pivot will Microsoft have to make next? And more importantly, will they survive it? Thanks so much for joining me on this one.